I think we can
Yeah,
start.
thanks. I think we should start. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us on this webinar. And this is our fourth season. Sambhav has been conducting webinars for now, this is the fourth year, as I say, it's the fourth season. And interestingly, we are on episode four. So we are on four this at this point in time. And the topic of this season, as we have been looking at it, the way that we have taken the theme of this season, I should say, is decoding circularity. So that's our season four theme. Now, when you look at decoding circularity, the idea is to talk about, to deep dive and explore all aspects of circularity, including the core concept implementation, regulatory frameworks, and fundamental reasons driving adoption. And we also look at different stakeholders, the difficult fractions to recycle, and looking at future trends shaping the circular economy. At the end of the day, while life started off talking about recycling, especially when it comes to e-waste, it was more of dismantling. And Mr. Yadav has joined us. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Yadav. And it started off with primarily with dismantling, and then recently, when I say recently, this was about 3 years back, with the change in the rulings, we truly started talking about recycling of materials of the products. And going forward, we are talking about complete circularity, wherein the secondary materials get used back into the products that were originally they were used for. So that is the goal towards which Karo Sambhav has always been working towards, and which is why we are always talking the word circularity and not collection, recycling, or just any kind of dismantling or anything like that. So, as part of decoding circularity today in this particular webinar, we are talking about informal, not invisible. Now, I'm actually, when I saw the topic the team came up with, it was, I mean, the way they shaped it, I was really proud of it. It sounded very nice. And informal, not invisible. And it has been a topic which has been in the mouths of everybody, whether it is regulators, corporates, governments, the pollution control boards, whatnot, okay, whoever it is, for many, many years. And sometimes it was looked as a hazard, sometimes it was looked at, hey, we need to do something about it, let's establish some partnerships, let's do some kind of integration. And even now, we find that many times there are even, and forgive me for saying this, sometimes even within the government establishments, we find contradictory versions. Somewhere somebody wants to integrate them, somewhere somebody wants to partner, and there are some sections of the government which is like, hey, keep them aside. We don't even want them to come into the play. So it confuses a lot for us people, for people like us who are in the operational side of things, and it kind of what is it supposed to have? How is it supposed to go on, and what should we do? And if it had been a school or a college, let's say in a debate competition, the title would have been possibly informal, not invisible. I mean, it is a boon or a bane kind of a debate. But I guess here we have come long past that stage in life, and we are looking at what and how is the right way to do it. Now, personally, I look at things from two lenses. One, I'm a supply chain domain expert, and when I look at it from a supply chain domain expertise, I see this as a very fantastic example of a well-established reverse logistics operation. Now you have service at your doorstep. There's anything and everything is collected. Whatever you want to give will be taken up. Nothing is, there's no to nothing. Everything is picked up. The monetary exchange happens right there. It's all cash driven completely. And then imagine it goes to a hyper-local collection point wherein there is a lot of sorting according to material that happens, packaging according to material that happens, and then it moves across the chain from hyper-local to a local to a zonal, and then if I cut across a region and everything, goes to the national level where you get very, very specific items, very, very specific parts. And across the chain, what you also find happening is that the parts are identified, the items of value are taken out. You are doing every element of circularity possible in the sense like if the life of something can be extended, it is extended, something can be repair, it is repaired. If something can be refurbished, it can be refurbished. Or if parts are to be harvested, they are harvested. And everything is kind of going back into the chain, going back into the system for reuse. So it is a fantastic example, in my opinion, from a pure supply chain perspective. I admire it. And then on top of it, if you notice, there is nothing about any written processes. There are no major computers. Inventory at every stage is very, very clear. Accounting is very clear. Nothing is on the books. And guess that is where our problem is. One of our biggest problems is. So it is a fabulous operation. Any corporate will give their arms and legs and bring in all the top four consulting companies in the world to set up something like this. And there are millions of people who are working here. Millions and millions of people who are working here, and it works. It's a super oiled machinery. But then, when I wear the human lens, now as a simple human being, when I look at it, what do I see? I see a lot of suffering. I see a lot of human rights violation. Not only talking about child labor, we're not talking only about slavery, drug abuse, appalling living conditions, and whatnot, and then complete disregard to anything that that might happen to the environment. There's no concern about it. At the end of the day, if you look at it, the people that are in it, and I guess most of the people that are in it, are here in this space, as we call as the informal sector, are here in the space more from a survival standpoint. And it is a survival of now. It is not about what's going to happen the next minute or the next hour or tomorrow, day after, whatever. It's about now and how do they do it. And for them, when it comes to, for anybody for that matter, when it comes to survival, things like what's happening to environment. I mean, they don't even realize how when they're doing some recycling work in an informal area, they don't even realize how much it damages them physically or mentally. It causes a lot of physical and mental trauma. But then they are kind of they just go through with it because of the momentary survival instincts, let me just say. So what is the right thing to do? Which is the right way to go about what is formal? And when you said like, hey, can we have all of them under GST? Can I have all of them under when establish traceability across the chain? Can I look at fraud? Can I ensure that all of these things are taken care of? Do they become formal? Or there is more to it? Well, I only gave you my view from a standpoint of a supply chain expert as well as another common man on the road. But then we have our panel members on the panel now, Subhrajit, Mehak, Priti, and Mr. Yadav here, who can give their views and perspectives from different viewpoints, because each of them comes from very, very different backgrounds, and it is going to be very interesting to understand how over the years this struggle of this informal to formal, should we change, should we transform, should we keep it, and what is right and what is wrong, and what is the possible way forward. We can hear from them. And to take us through that panel, and by the way, when I really thank all of you for being here and to be part of this webinar with us. And on the same note, I also want to thank our sponsors, Apple, Dell Technologies, Canon India, Cisco, Ericsson, and Tejas Networks for providing us the platform to discuss such topics, such and many more topics, and also spread the awareness across the people in the country. So to take us through the panel, we have our own Shivangi. Shivangi is a specialist in extended producer responsibility. She's been in the field for many, many years. I mean, about 7, 8 years at least, to the extent that I know. And she works on the e-waste, plastic, and battery waste. However, today our discussions will be focused, while on the informal sector, we will be talking more about the e-waste portion of the informal sector. She kind of works with leading FMCG and IT companies to design and implement circular economy systems for collection, recycling, and secondary material recovery in India. She holds an MSc in Environmental Sciences and Resource Management from the Terry School of Advanced Studies, and previously has worked in environmental consultancy on audits and impact assessments. So that's Shivangi for you, and thank you once again. Over to you, Shivangi. Just walk us through this and let's hear the viewpoints of the experts on the panel.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mani, for the introduction and setting the context for the conversation today. As Mani said, informal sector is a well-evolved organism that has already gone through the iterations of optimization that we are still trying to go through. And it's an elephant in every room where any conversation about circular economy is happening. So we do need to address it. And as both Indian supply chains and global supply chains mature, it is necessary to deeply understand exactly what the practical realities are on ground and what are the gaps and where those gaps need to be filled in. So we have a great panel of speakers here for all of you to discuss on this topic. We have Mr. Subhrajit Goswami from Center for Science and Environment to talk about the almost cat and mouse dynamic that GST department and informal sector has been having for the past few years. Ms. Priti Mahesh, she's an experienced environment and public health consultant, to talk about on her experience with the Indian policy structures and what needs to be addressed. Ms. Mehak Verma from Chintan on their hands-on experience working with the informal sector, and Mr. Ashok Yadav from Jharkhand State Pollution Control Board on the informal sector of Jharkhand, how the State Pollution Control Board engages with the informal sector, and the areas where improvement is needed. So we'll start with our first speaker of the day, Mr. Subhrajit Goswami. Subhrajit is an environmental researcher and policy analyst with 7+ years of experience in sustainability and environmental justice. He's a program officer at CSC, New Delhi, where he works on circular economy, industrial waste, and energy policy. He's a contributing author for Down to Earth. And as the contributing author, he writes on environmental technology and policy and has previously worked in a leading environmental law firm on cases presented before NGT, High Court, and Supreme Court, and has supported many grassroots movements advocating for environmental rights. So just to set a little bit of context, Subhajit, before we start, because CSE, I think, recently has released a report talking about the GST structure on waste and recycling, the report called Relax the Tax, which examines the current GST structure on waste and recycling and highlights how the existing system creates barriers for the formalization of the sector or formal recycling sector, while it also enables the current tax leakages to continue happening. So I request you to begin with sharing the key findings from your report with us, please.
True. Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to thank Karo Sambhav team for organizing such a it's very crucial topic. Also, although CSE is working on this topic of waste management, circular economy since years, my team as well as waste team, we have a designated team for that. I'm quite new to this sector. And as I just started, it's very interesting to see that the few resources I considered is one of a few of them is a YouTube channel of Karo Sambhav. It has a huge discussion on several aspects which help people to understand what is happening on ground. As we are talking about our latest study that relax the tax, I just want to give a disclaimer that we will talk less about tax. As an environmental organization, we'll talk more about social and environmental aspect of this report. If you look at just current situation, it's very unlikely that our waste, if someone is using or reusing waste or any kind of transaction happening with waste, it attracts tax in current system, and which is sometimes very high. Even the latest change didn't change, in few sectors like metal, e-waste, it attracts 18% tax, which is quite high. And as we looked into this three I can maybe three major findings I can first say. That is 18% tax on GST is we have considered around 14 waste stream, and few of them has 18% of tax GST, which is unviable for small player to get into the formal system, as we can identify during the course of our conversation. We calculated the estimated loss of revenue using the method that we wanted to estimate the total market size of this waste, and we found that in current situation for 14 waste stream, approximately 65,000 crores of GST, potential GST, which was supposed to come if there was a kind of formal operation in this sector is a loss. And also, if we just go is in business as usual scenario, it will increase to 87,000 crore. So essentially, how much tax we will collect from waste stream, it will, the double amount we will be losing, as we are unable to maybe integrate the humongous informal sector we have. And certainly there is another problem which we found during discussion, that is we have equal tax for both virgin material as well as recycled material. So for example, if you are using you're cutting a new plant tree to maybe build a furniture, it will attract the same tax as you are reusing, which is very counterproductive in terms of if you want to enable circularity. So these three major findings, we can maybe discuss other things of this report in due course. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Subhrajit. And these are some numbers that we usually don't think about, because these play a huge impact on whether the economics of any operations they work out or not. And having that high barrier also then disincentivizes anyone to even make that change, because it's such a huge jump for them to turn from one place to another. So for any earning that they were doing, or any spend that they were doing for $100, there's an additional cost of $18 that they now have to bear. And that's absolutely huge from an informal sector perspective. So what prompted CSC to look into the interplay between tax structures and informal sector here?
As you can see, like our current economy is more of a take, make, dispose system. We don't have a circular economy in place. We are talking about this since last 1 decade, maybe. Major talk has been happening. But if we look at if we look at anything as we consume, it's mostly business to consumer or business to other business. But here in this case, when we are trying to enable the waste circularity, it's a consumer to business thing. We maybe as a person or an industry, they produce some sort of waste which can be reused in a different way. So as a CSC, as an environmental organization, our argument was very simple. That is two major aspects. One is the social security of these informal operators, who has been managing almost 80% or 90%, maybe more, of few waste streams. And the way they are working, the health condition, the overall efficiency of technology they have right now is not up to the mark. One, and another is like the huge dependence on virgin resource. In country like India, we are one of the few countries, like among the many countries, we are also like extracting a lot of resources. Our resource extraction is 2.5 times higher than global average. So it's high time that we will have to somehow find out a path to reutilize our waste. So these two angles was there. Tax is one of the many things which is needed to be looked into to establish a proper system of circular economy. So that is overall background of our study, and that's the context we try to set. And the purpose of our study is certainly to discuss and like come across with all of these stakeholders, so that we can find out we can start a dialogue, maybe in a more way, which has been there for years, but we have wanted to compile as much people as we can in this dialogue. That's what the purpose of it. Thank you.
So how has the response been from industry people that you must have talked to, and where do you see this conversation going in future?
Yes. So what we have done for this report, we have reached out to the the small aggregator, to the highest policy office in Delhi, like maybe the ministries. We have been we have come across all of the people. We tried to reach them. We tried to find out as of the business as a concern for informal operators. The response is very simple. This 18% is impossible for them to join in this particular area. When someone is selling a 10 rupees worth of a waste, if they are giving 1 rupees and 80 paisa to government without so it's not feasible for them as they work in a very low margin. And also, as we have talked with different ministries, there is a notion that people wants to change. They understand the emphasis, but the on ground, a policy is currently not in that place. So that dialogue we are trying to raise amongst many so that it can helpful. So overall industry as well as recycler also similar aspect is there. This GST should be slightly lower given the context of maybe lower as much as low can possible given the context of circular economy. That has been think.
So one last question, Subhrajit. So
Yes.
since you had analyzed various waste streams and seen how GST plays a part in each of them, how would you compare another waste stream which has, say, a better rate of GST to an e-waste?
Yes, so there are few waste stream which has better rate of GST, that is 5% GST. But when we are talking about waste collection as well as when there is a use of industry, for example, if we look at biomass or if we look at fly ash, these are also industrial waste which has been generating from single source in that way. So it is easier to circulate it, integrate in circular economy. CSE has been doing a detailed study of industrial waste, has done a detailed study. We have almost compiled 10 different industries in a compendium where we saw that the industrial waste is slightly easier. But other waste such as e-waste as well as metal waste, in few cases in metal there is high GST rate, but there is a the latest steel policy where we have to reuse more and more 40% approximately by 2030. So there are few approach that is there, but in case of e-waste it is sourced from different areas. So certainly, as we discussed with the sectors who is involved in collecting and segregating this waste and maybe sending it to particular recycler, they are they are saying that obviously that 18% will somehow enable them to be in the part of this system, and maybe it will help them. It will obviously that the burden will be lesser, and it will help them somehow be, be in a system which is more environmentally as well as health-wise viable. So that is the overall ideas. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Subhrajit, for sharing, because GST is not an aspect people usually think about when they're thinking e-waste recycling. And one thing I think that gets lost sometimes is that there is a time period that is spent between the time when you have bought the waste and the time where you're able to extract and sell the materials. And the higher the GST is, the more cost burden there is on a person. So it definitely is a very viable tool to encourage more players to formalize. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you. To our second speaker of the day, Priti Mahesh is a senior environment and public health consultant with over 25 years of experience. She brings deep expertise in waste management, circular economy, and just transition, and has worked extensively across India and the global south to shape policies and strategies for sustainability, health equity, and inclusive development. Priti, over to you. I think first question would be, you've worked in e-waste and informal sector for so many years. How has your own view around informal sector evolved over the years? And can you map that evolution against how our ecosystem has changed through the years?
Thank you, Kitty, and thank you to Karo Sambhav for inviting me to this platform for a very, very pertinent issue, informal sector. And that's something which, as you mentioned, I've been kind of working on for, more than 2 decades, looking at, how they were viewed probably in 2006 or 7 and now in 2024, and just seen a lot of change, both in terms of regulatory systems which have come in since then, and also how kind of different players have kind of joined this whole ecosystem. So we've always kind of believed that the informal sector plays a major role in e-waste management. So I mean, I believe that when I started, kind of engaging on this issue back in 2006. But I think earlier I worried that it would be very hard to mainstream them. especially, ensuring transparency in the value chain. Especially, if you look at their individuality and entrepreneurial style, that felt like a barrier, in the initial years when I started working with them. But over time, working very, very closely with the informal sector has changed, my perception on that. Genuine linkages obviously can be built in ways that preserve their entrepreneurship and leverage their trust networks, which really make the system work on the ground. Efficiency was another concern. The informal sector may look very fragmented or low tech compared to formal recycler. But the scale of repair, reuse, and cannibalization that the sector carries out every day actually shows real resource efficiency. I think this is resource efficiency in action. And it is not really inefficiency, it's extending products' life and reducing waste. So this shift also, if you see it in the larger context, also mirrors changes in India's e-waste landscape. Device proliferation, shorter life cycles, and more modular electronics have increased both opportunities as well and complexities, obviously. But formal EPR and take-back scheme often assume that the consumers obviously hand e-waste directly to the registered recycler, and that's how the system has been designed. Whereas in reality, most flows are passing through the informal, kind of door-to-door collectors or dismantlers. So policies often underestimate this transaction cost and trust networks, which these actors manage so effectively. So, today I see the informal sector not as a, kind of a problem, but as a backbone of circularity. So the challenge now is obviously designing systems that channel their entrepreneurial energy into safe, transparent, and scalable value chains. So overall, ecosystem has emerged, and ecosystem has obviously at times ignored the role of informal sector over time. But I think it's kind of coming back into that conversation where we do see that it is almost impossible to manage this entire system without the help of informal sector. So if we build on the informal sectors, kind of I would say skills and trust networks, we don't really just solve e-waste challenges, we create the backbone of a truly circular economy in India. So I think this, my entire journey in the last 20 years is pretty much made me see this entire curve going up and down. Yeah, that's, I would say, is what is my realization.
Two points from that are coming to my mind. First and foremost, you're absolutely right. One of the reasons I think informal sector is able to work or at least reach door to door so well is because they are making it easy for people to give their waste, right? And I think the expectation that sometimes a few of our policies have that consumers will change their behavior so wholeheartedly that they will go out of their way to give waste is, frankly speaking, not happening. So not just from an EPR policy perspective, but in general, any other policy level, what do you think needs to change in these policies to address the dominance that informal sector has in e-waste handling?
I think we need to reframe policy to treat informal sector as partners, map them, register them, make them eligible for training, grants, rather than kind of criminalizing their work. So I think the whole attempt, has been to somewhere make them kind of exclude them. They've been never, if you look at even the first policy which came in 2011-12 on e-waste, and right now the last regulation which came in, you do see mentions of the informal sector, but you hardly see any real effort to kind of include them. So there is this term which I think most people tend to use, which is like formalization. if formalization is killing the kind of system which the informal sector has created over the years, I think that will have really very, very, I think, incorrect impact. And that's not the transition that we're looking at. So I think there is that fine balance which the policy needs to achieve, where there is a possibility of, and I think in the age of, this whole digital revolution that we're going through, I think it is so much possible that we really do a real integration. So we are not really, kind of trying to absorb the informal sector into the formal. We are trying to create systems which are really putting them in a different space. So they're not really marginal actors. They're really primarily logistics backbone of e-waste in India. And I think that role needs to be defined and clearly, kind of made space for in the policy that is being created over the years. But I think that's a piece which is missing. It's always treated that you're creating a system and somehow the informal sector will come in that system or need to be part of the system. That's not really possible. So I think they have to be thought as these mid-level. These are not really, kind of part of A or B. These are somewhere in between, and that needs to be recognized, and that space needs to be created for them.
And keeping that balance of, I think, formalization also then takes into consideration one more concern that you usually hear about formalizing the informal sector, or in some cases, even the thought of competing with the informal sector, which is the loss of livelihoods. Because while the human rights violation that are usually end up happening in these ecosystems, those need to be absolutely addressed. As you said, demonizing the sector will exclude them, will not only stop us from utilizing an existing structure, but it will also cause a lot of loss of livelihood. And where they can be brought in a proper manner, they should be brought in instead of excluding them completely from the narrative. But so, Priti, but do you think there is a point in time in future where informal and formal sectors are working together and this integration is truly possible? What does that look like for you?
I completely, I think, believe in that. If we are honest, integration, if you see, honestly, till now, integration has mostly been lip service. The current model of formalization is right now binary. Either you're fully compliant with all the GST numbers, paperwork, audits, or you're invisible, as your, kind of webinar clearly mentions. So that's not really integration. That's exclusion dressed up as regulation. So I think that's what has to be, kind of clearly be recognized. On the ground, if you see this kind of approach, that strips away livelihood. And this hardly does anything to improve the safety and traceability, because we can't really ensure that the material is not flowing to the informal sector. So if you stick by the system that you're creating right now, you will end up, again, in the same bit of, environment and occupational safety concerns. So collectors and dismantlers are, right now doing the bulk of e-waste handling in the informal sector. But because they're not counted, their work doesn't show up in official, targets. At times, their health risks remain unchanged. And that's also because if you look at the EPR budgets or EPR frameworks, that has no connection with the informal sector. So it is, kind of, I'm looking at a future where obviously real integration is possible. And that is when you recognize the collector as service providers, creating aggregator roles that bridge this compliance gap, and also earmarking certain EPR funds for safety, for training. I think without that, what we call formalization is often just, kind of, as I said, erasure of existing system. And I think that's the critical blind spot right now. And we need to address that if we want truly circular economy, because, the kind of role that the informal sector is playing, I think no one can play that. So, instead of treating them as just a compliance problem, I think the rules should explicitly recognize collector, aggregators, and dismantlers as eligible service provider under EPR. That means they can feed into producer target if their work is verified, audited. If you look at right now the system, obviously, even if the recycler, in fact, I was speaking to a recycler, some time back, and they wanted to source material from 𝗗𝗶𝘀𝗶𝗀𝗃 in the city. Because obviously a lot of small devices are collected by the informal sector, not really by the larger recycler. But he told me very, very honestly, he said, I can't buy from them because without invoices, I have no proof for GST and EPR reporting. So if I do that, I put my license at risk. So despite both sides wanting to really work together, the deal doesn't go through just because the paperwork doesn't fit the ground reality. So I think there is this middle layer which can be created, and I think that's what I'm looking at the future.
No, that has been the experience here as well, because it's not even directly sourcing from 𝗗𝗶𝘀𝗃𝗀𝗃, right? I think Subhrajit had also mentioned that sometimes even two different government entities don't talk to each other, and that causes dissonance. So if you talk to GST department, their clear communication is do not work with the informal sector at all under no circumstances. So yeah, this is where policy, not only from the perspective of recognizing this important player, but also policymakers talking to each other across different ministries is very important, because that's how implementation will trickle down. Thank you, Priti. Thank you so much, because when it comes to working with informal sector, usually the stance that people end up taking is either you are eliminating a problem completely and you need to do away with it because there are clear problems in that area, or people end up thinking, oh, that's never going to happen. There's no way the informal sector is ever going to, quote unquote, formalize. But yes, there is, I think there are definitely ways in which we can not only leverage the system and the learnings that they have built, but also slowly pull them into a more structured form without completely destroying whatever has been built. Thank you so much.
Very important. I think it's important what you're also pointing out. I think it's very important to bring them in structure without disturbing their structure. So I think it's that's the bit which is very, very crucial.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Priti. We have our next speaker up, Ms. Mehak Verma. Mehak is an environmental educator and researcher specializing in youth engagement, sustainable technologies, and environmental education. She holds a master's in environmental sciences and is completing her PhD in environmental biotechnology. At Chintan Environment Research and Action Group, she leads the Youth for Environment Stewardship project and engaging students on issues like e-waste, recycling, and circular economy practices. Welcome, Mehak. Mehak, given the challenges as both of our previous speakers have pointed out, there are certain challenges that informal sector workers face in complying with a lot of the rules of formalization. How can we ensure a collaboration between the formal and informal markets, which is when we're working with the informal sector, when you're working with the informal sector, how can we sort of convince them to make this change and be more compliant? What policy interventions do you think are needed to enable this?
First of all, thank you, Kirti, and thank you to Karo Sambhav for inviting me to this very important conversation. And the title itself says informal and not invisible. It sets the tone perfectly. For decades, India informal e-waste sector has carried the weight of recycling on its shoulders. And long before the legislations and the formal system came into play, these workers were already ensuring materials stayed in circulation. Yet, despite their central role, they have often been excluded from the compliance frameworks that govern the e-waste today. And as we reflect on this evolution, I want to emphasize one thing, that India cannot achieve truly sustainable e-waste management unless the formal and the informal markets finds ways to collaborate. With compliance and dignity built into collaboration, and this question is not whether we need the informal sector, but how to work with them as equal partners in the ecosystem. And Chintan began its work with the waste and waste pickers. The waste and the waste pickers are considered as the backbone of waste management and recycling in India, right? So building from this heritage while continuing to embrace it, and we try to increase resource equity among the poor, reduce exposure to air pollution and mitigate it, and lead the way towards a more climate resilient economy that breaks away from the take, make, waste culture and create a circular society. And to your question, I think that the first step is to stop seeing the formal and the informal sector as competitors. They are complementary. We should recognize complementarity, not competition. And the informal sector is unmatched in last mile collection, as they are well aware of every household, every shop, and every lane, right? So the formal sector, on the other hand, brings safer technologies and infrastructure. Here, the real challenge is linking these strengths together. And from a policy perspective, I would suggest three directions. One, we can create a light touch registration or licensing system for the informal aggregators that doesn't require heavy paperwork. Once registered, they can legally channel e-waste to authorized recycler without fear of harassment or penalization. Second, require producer to meet a part of their extended producer responsibility targets through partnership with the informal network. This way, integration is not optional, but built into the system. So, for example, we can amend EPR rules so that the producer must demonstrate that at least a fixed percentage, maybe we can say 30 to 40% of their annual collection comes through verified informal partnership. So this makes the partnership a systemic and measurable and non-negotiable. And the three, we can provide incentives to the recyclers who show structured collaboration with the informal actors, including trainings or maybe fair pricing. This could include tax rebates also, and built on special compliance rating for those who provide training and they are ensuring fair pricing or build long-term partnerships with the informal sector. So by this, we can say that collaboration becomes compliant when compliance framework are co-created with the realities of informal workers rather than imposed from above.
Absolutely well pointed out, Mehak. And I think one word that you had used that often gets overlooked is dignity, because for a lot of the workers working in these informal ecosystems, that dignity aspect is a huge thing of trying to move away from informal work to formal work. If you are someone who's working in an ecosystem where everyone around you is equal as you, it's easier to keep operating in that system versus having to move away into a system that's automatically looking down on you. That also creates a challenge. I'm wondering though, if certain soft support systems, not just in terms of tax rebates or easier licensing, but also in terms of say financial education to these informal sector workers, or some education for their children, or that would enable or make it easier for them to then send their kids to school instead of involving them in their day-to-day operations. Have you seen any of such support systems help these informal sector workers switch?
Yeah, like at Chintan, we are also working, we have the material recovery facilities. So there we have this MRF in Zakira, where informal waste workers, especially women waste pickers, were integrated into the formal system of waste management. So the main objective of the facility was to reduce the waste being sent to the Bhalaswa landfill and to ensure safe recycling of plastic, including low-value plastic, through an extended producer responsibility mechanism. So to achieve this, this facility was designed around the principle of informal sector inclusion. So the waste pickers were provided with structural trainings and safety gear, and they have this fixed working hours. This not only enabled them to earn a stable income with dignity, but also allowed them to balance work with their family responsibilities. And by recognizing their contribution and creating a safe, organized working condition, the MRF help waste picker transition from their informal recycling to come into the formal recycling system.
Having worked with not just the informal sector, but also in conversation with policymakers or recyclers or any other stakeholders in the waste management chain, what are the common misconceptions that you have seen people have about the informal sector?
So in my experience, the biggest misconception is that informal workers are always seen as simply polluters or unsafe dismantlers, that they cannot adapt or improve. So the policymakers and recyclers sometimes view them as a problem to be fixed rather than as a skilled or resourceful actor. But the truth is different. You know, these workers are incredibly efficient collectors, and they have deep on the ground network that no formal company can build overnight. And when given training and support, they're quick to adopt more sustainable practices. So this is how do we change this misconception? First, by showcasing evidence. Pilots or informal dismantlers are trained and integrated. Like I have given you this example of Chintan MRF in Zakira, where the informal waste workers, especially the women waste pickers, were integrated into the formal system of waste management. So to ensure the safe recycling thing through the EPR mechanism. So second, by changing our language, calling them not unorganized but self-organized, which reflect the reality of their network. And finally, by highlighting success stories where collaboration has benefited everyone, and we start seeing them as a missing link, not the obstacle, but the narrative changes completely. So the misconception dissolve when we showcase informal workers not as the barriers, but as a missing link for achieving a true circular economy. So this is all about it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mehak, for sharing your insights from working with the informal sector workers, because yes, the human element is something that's very, very important to keep in mind when we are figuring out how to work best or integrate these workers best into our systems. Thank you so much. And now we move on to our fourth and final speaker of the day, Mr. Ashok Kumar Yadav. Mr. Yadav is the officer on special duty at Jharkhand State Pollution Control Board, Ranchi. Originating from Begusarai, Bihar, he possesses a background in chemical engineering and a PG diploma in environmental engineering. His career commenced in 1989 as an environmental engineer at SPCB Dhanbad, progressing to regional officer in Hazaribagh from 2018. Following his retirement in March 2024, he took on the role of officer on special duty. Welcome, sir. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Good evening, ma'am.
So, sir, we wanted to understand how does informal sector worker in Jharkhand work? Jharkhand में जो कबाड़ी वाले हैं या informal sector workers हैं, how do they work? Do they usually collect and dispose e-waste? या फिर ऐसा है कि cities में ज़्यादा हैं और छोटे शहरों में informal sector workers उतने नहीं हैं? तो थोड़ा समझना चाहते थे कि झारखंड में आपने क्या देखा है कि इनफॉर्मल वर्कर्स जो होते हैं, हमारे कबाड़ी वाले होते हैं, वो कैसे अपना काम करते हैं?
ये मैम इस तरह से है कि झारखंड में फॉर्मल एंड इनफॉर्मल दोनों तरह के कलेक्टर्स हैं, रिसाइकलर्स हैं। तो फॉर्मल जो है वो सभी तरह के एक्सपर्ट उनके पास हैं और जो भी रिसाइकिल होना चाहिए वो सब कर पाते हैं। लेकिन इनफॉर्मल जो है उनके पास कोई प्रॉपर टेक्निक नहीं है, वो कलेक्ट करते हैं लेकिन जैसे तैसे डिस्पोज करते हैं। They are mainly hawkers and collecting the e-waste from city and rural areas also. उनका ज़्यादा कलेक्शन रूरल एरिया से होता है और इसमें जो फॉर्मल एजेंसी है ये जो है ठीक तरह से उतना कलेक्ट नहीं कर पाते हैं, उतना मैन पावर नहीं है उनके पास। यहाँ चाहिए डोर टू डोर कलेक्शन एंड शॉप टू शॉप कलेक्शन। डोर टू डोर कलेक्शन नहीं हो पाता है फॉर्मल एजेंसी के द्वारा। इसके चलते इनफॉर्मल भी फूल फल रहा है। साथ ही साथ इनफॉर्मल जो है कुछ ऊंचे दाम पर ई वेस्ट को खरीद लेते हैं।
हाँ जी, हाँ जी।
और कोई डॉक्यूमेंटेशन की जरूरत नहीं पड़ता है उनको, ऐसे खरीद लिया, जैसे है रिफर्बिशिंग किया, जैसे कि अपना डिस्पोज कर दिया। और जो ई वेस्ट जो है जनरेटर है, वो भी ये नहीं समझ पाते हैं कि हम जो ये दे रहे हैं हॉकर को, इसका क्या पूरा प्रभाव है। अल्लाह हम लोग जो है लगातार टाइम टू टाइम इसमें अवेयरनेस प्रोग्राम कराते रहते हैं। हाल में भी जो है विश्व पर्यावरण दिवस के ओकेजन पर 1 वीक का प्रोग्राम हम लोग रखे और पूरा अवेयरनेस प्रोग्राम कई जगहों में, कई शहरों में, झारखंड में हम लोग करवाए। इसका हम लोग को लग रहा है कि सबसे अच्छा उपाय है अवेयरनेस प्रोग्राम, इससे ही कंट्रोल हो सकता है। ज़्यादा लोग जागरूक होंगे तब इस पर जो है गौर करेंगे, ध्यान देंगे, तब कंट्रोल हो पाएगा।
जागरूकता का एक बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण रोल होता है जब हम वेस्ट मैनेजमेंट की बात करते हैं। बिल्कुल। एंड सर एक बात बताइए जरा, स्टेट पोल्यूशन कंट्रोल बोर्ड जब कोशिश करता है जागरूकता फैलाने की या फिर किसी भी तरीके से इन इनफॉर्मल वर्कर्स को फॉर्मल सिस्टम में लेके आने की, तो आपने क्या देखा है कि क्या चैलेंजेस आते हैं उसमें सबसे ज्यादा?
अब इसमें क्या है कि जो फॉर्मल एजेंसी है, हमको लगता है वो उतना पे नहीं कर पाते हैं कॉस्ट जितना इनफॉर्मल देते हैं, और कैश उनको मिल जाता है, वो हॉकर्स को बेच देते हैं। वहाँ पर फॉर्मल वाले फेल हो जाते हैं, इनके पास डॉक्यूमेंटेशन का भी बाउंडेशन है, इनफॉर्मल के साथ वो सब कुछ नहीं है। यहाँ पर फॉर्मल वाले फेल हो रहे हैं।
हाँ जी, क्योंकि इनफॉर्मल सेक्टर वाले थोड़ा और अच्छा पैसा भी दे पाते हैं, आपके घर पे आके ले रहे हैं, जल्दी से पैसा दे रहे हैं। मैं समझ सकती हूँ क्यों ऐसे में आम जनता थोड़ा और आसान पाती है इनफॉर्मल वर्कर्स या कबाड़ी वालों के साथ काम करना। ऐसे में क्यों इतना जरूरी है ये जागरूकता के जितने भी कैंपेन्स हैं वो करना, क्योंकि जब तक आम जनता को ये इंफॉर्मेशन नहीं पहुंचेगी कि क्या बुराई है ई वेस्ट का गलत तरीके से रिसाइकलिंग होने का, या फिर अगर आप सही जगह से सही तरीके से नहीं रिसाइकल करते हैं उसके क्या दुष्परिणाम हो सकते हैं, वो जानना बहुत ही जरूरी है। एंड इसमें हाँ जी सर।
इसके लिए तो हम बराबर जागरूकता अभियान चला रहे हैं और लोगों को इसके बारे में, इसका दुष्परिणाम जो है इसके बारे में बता रहे हैं, और लोग टर्न हो रहे हैं। शहरों में तो इनफॉर्मल जो है वो डाउन हो रहे हैं।
हाँ जी।
लोग अब जो है प्रॉपर एजेंसी के थ्रू जो है बेच रहे हैं वेस्ट, ताकि प्रॉपर डिस्पोजल हो उसका।
जी हाँ जी, बिल्कुल सर। और ये सूचना का जो तार जोड़ना है, इसमें बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण रोल होता है स्टेट पोल्यूशन कंट्रोल बोर्ड्स का, क्योंकि आप लोग ही हैं जो एक्सपर्ट्स हैं इस मामले में कि क्या पर्यावरण के लिए गलत रहेगा, क्या सही रहेगा स्टेट में। एंड अपने खुद के राज्य की जितनी जानकारी आप को होगी उतनी जानकारी सेंट्रल लेवल पे नहीं हो सकती है। तो जहाँ की राष्ट्रीय जितने भी हमारे रेगुलेशंस होते हैं वो बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण होते हैं एक तरीके की समझ बिठाने के लिए। राष्ट्रीय या राज्यों का खुद की अंडरस्टैंडिंग जो होती है वो बहुत ही जरूरी हो जाती है ऐसे में, ताकि वो अपनी जनता को अपने हिसाब से अपने तरीके से जागरूक कर सके। बिल्कुल। थैंक यू सो मच सर। Thank you for joining us today. Thank you to all our speakers, Mr. Subhrajit Goswami, Ms. Priti, Mahesh, Ms. Mehak Verma, and of course, Mr. Ashok Kumar Yadav, for sharing all of your insights into the informal sector work. It's never a topic जो कि एक ही बार में खत्म हो जाएगा, एक बार की बात नहीं है, रेगुलर बातचीत करने की जरूरत है इस चीज को लेके, और ये याद रखने की जरूरत है कि शुरुआत करनी जरूरी है, आप उस पर इम्प्रूव धीरे धीरे ऑफ कोर्स कर सकते हैं, बट जरूरी है कि रिकॉग्नाइज किया जाए उस चीज को, एंड फिर उसके ऊपर काम की शुरुआत की जाए. On behalf of Karo Sambhav, I'd like to thank our sponsors, but before I do that, I think there are a couple of questions in the chat box.
Just wanted to point to you after, yeah.
Yes. So
Right.
I'll quickly look at the questions. Mr. Ashish Jain has asked if there's any scope of getting knowledge of making connections with recyclers, or how to collaborate with recyclers. Mr. Ashish, I think I can actually take that question, because one quick way of doing this could be Central Pollution Control Board का जो पोर्टल है centralized, वहाँ पे जितने भी आपके registered recyclers हैं उनकी information दी हुई होती है. आप अपनी स्टेट के हिसाब से या फिर अपने रीजन के हिसाब से अक्सर पास जान सकते हैं कि कौन सा रिसाइकलर आपके पास है और कैसे उनसे बात कर सकते हैं. पर हाँ, जहां तक बात है कि आप रिसाइकलर्स तक कैसे पहुंचेंगे, कोई सिंपल तरीका नहीं है. एक समय था जब एक्सटेंडेड प्रोड्यूसर रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी के अंडर प्रोड्यूसर्स ये सब जानकारी अपने वेबसाइट्स पर डालते थे, बट अभी ये चीज क्योंकि यूनिफॉर्मली अप्लाई नहीं होती है हर जगह, डिपेंड करता है. सो मेरे पास कोई सीधा आंसर नहीं है इसका. आई ओपन द क्वेश्चन टू आवर पैनलिस्ट एज वेल, इफ एनी ऑफ यू हैव, आप में से किसी के पास भी कोई क्लियर तरीका है जिससे एज अ स्मॉल स्केल वर्कर, एक छोटे वर्कर के नाते आप रिसाइकलर से कनेक्शन कर सकते हैं. Okay.
I don't think there is any,
Katie, I'm having some problem looking at the other question. Hello?
I'm just sending it to you separately.
Okay, thank you. I believe, okay, if someone from our panel was not speaking, the other question is, how does the input tax credit mechanism work in the informal recycling sector?
1 second, Shivangi, I thought Subhrajit wanted to say something about the earlier question. Was that right?
No. Thanks. But
Okay.
maybe the next
Sorry,
one is coming for me.
Yes,
Fair enough.
Good thing, Mani, because I think, yes, the question would be very, very pertinent for Mr. Subhrajit about how the input tax mechanisms work, whether it is 5%, 18%, how do the credit mechanisms work?
So as we have talked with like smaller aggregators who are like the other part who are not in the part of informal sector, so obviously they are not under the GST regime, so they will not pay the tax. But what happens is, like, when larger party who have a GST registration, they kind of integrate the 18% tax, like the amount which is somehow when they buy it from the unregistered person, so they will just charge some extra amount or maybe give them less money, so that in the further way they can, like, somehow this amount can be GST can be GST, as they have GST, they can claim as input tax credit. So that is the idea we have found. In our report we have made a detailed diagram where how these flows input tax credit happen, but that with consultations and with some experts. So that is the overall idea I have about input tax credit. Yeah.
Thank you so much. The next question that we have is regarding air pollution, and how do the air emissions from informal practices compare to those from formal recycling technologies? So, अगर हम informal sector workers को या informal sector practices को compare कर रहे हैं formal practices में, तो air pollution कितना ज़्यादा कितना कम दिखता है? I'll open the question to our panelists if anyone has anything to add here.
So the informal recycling practices, especially in e-waste, typically involve open burning of wires, acid leaching in the backyards, or dismantling without safety controls. So these releases a very a lot of toxic emission like dioxins or furans or lead or particulate matter directly into the air and the surrounding community. This impact is highly localized, meaning workers and nearby families breathe it in every day. And when we talk about the formal recycling technologies, they're designed with emission controls. For example, we have this enclosed shredders or the fume extraction systems, scrubbers, and filters. So while formal facilities do generate emission, these are regulated and treated before being released. So the difference is not just in the scale, but in toxicity and exposure.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mehak.
Just
Priti,
want
I
to
think
add-
you had something to add.
I just want to add, Shivani. Yes, obviously the emissions from the informal sector and the formal sector differ a lot. The emission controls in the formal systems are supposed to, kind of mitigate these risks. But if we look at the current situation, I think we need to take a pause and look at that as well. That if you look at the formal sector currently, a lot of these are unmanned or they are not really monitored regularly, which would mean that they are probably not the same emission, but there's still a lot of emissions which are happening from the formal recycling plants as well.
वहाँ पे थोड़ी सी गवर्नेंस की और ऑडिट्स का एस्पेक्ट आ जाता है कि अगर रजिस्टर्ड हैं तो उनकी अगर मॉनिटरिंग समय से की जा रही है तो उस मॉनिटरिंग के जरिए हम देख सकते हैं कि अगर इक्विपमेंट भी है तो वो इक्विपमेंट इस्तेमाल किया भी जा रहा है या नहीं किया जा रहा है एंड बस फर्क आई थिंक सबसे बड़ा यही रहेगा कि एक इनफॉर्मल सेटअप में वो इक्विपमेंट एग्जिस्ट भी नहीं करता है, वेराज फॉर्मल सेटअप में इक्विपमेंट एग्जिस्ट करता है, बट जरूरी है कि हम जो भी कंप्लायंस मैकेनिज्म्स लगा रहे हैं वहाँ पे मॉनिटरिंग भी पूरी तरीके से हो ताकि एक्चुअली में उस इक्विपमेंट का इस्तेमाल किया जा सके. Thank you so much, Priti. If there are no further questions, I think I would just like to thank everyone for taking an hour out today and spending that with us to discuss this topic. बहुत ही कॉम्प्लेक्स टॉपिक है, ऐसी बात नहीं है कि बहुत ही आसान टॉपिक है. एंड यू कैन सी हमारे जितने भी पैनलिस्ट हैं उनका क्या क्या अलग अलग नजरिया रहा है, क्या एक्सपीरियंसेस रहे हैं, आप उसी से जान सकते हैं कि ये कोई नया कॉन्वर्सेशन टॉपिक नहीं है, कोई नई बात नहीं है, बट ये बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण बात है. On behalf of Karo Sambhav, I would like to thank our sponsors, Apple, Dell Technologies, Canon India, Cisco, Ericsson, and Tejas Networks for supporting this conversation. And most importantly, thank you all for joining us today and for your commitment to advancing circularity in India. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode of Season 4, Decoding Circularity. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.